This video was shot on July 4th, so happy America Day, everybody.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second Mockus Devlog. In the first Mockus Devlog, I talked about our preliminary marketing strategy. This one, I'm going to take a slightly different approach, and we're going to talk about the process by which I'm actually building the Iowa Mockus. So basically, this is going to be a little software engineering 101 or web application engineering 101, but it's going to be presented for those who don't actually know how to program. So if you're out there and you're watching this and you have no idea what backends and APIs and view layers mean, don't worry about it. I will explain. It will be so you can understand it and follow along, because this is interesting stuff. And for those of you who are considering a career in software development, given how the economy has shifted, this would be a really great video for getting a little bit of an insight into how an experienced developer approaches building a web application. So first, real quick, let me define that term web application. The Iowa Mockus is a web application, or short, web app. Basically, this is an application that runs in your web browser. You go to a website and you interact with it. You interact with these all the time. Many of your favorite websites are web applications. Web apps can be split into two requisite components, the server and the client. I'll throw a little diagram up, but the basic version is the server has the data and the API or backend logic to interact with it. The data being the actual information we're manipulating with the web application. On the client, you have your application, and broadly speaking, this is both the view layer, or what you see, the controls, the user interface, and also sort of a behind the scenes data layer, which is in itself kind of a proxy of the backend data. Again, it's not necessarily 100% one-to-one. There's a lot of stuff that's probably in there that the backend doesn't actually track. It's just stuff for the front-end application. And there's also stuff in there that's is the same data as the backend, but may or may not be up to date all the time, because it doesn't necessarily sync all the time. So when it comes to building software, I follow a basic 3-step process. The first step is to build the data layer, which again is that sort of proxy of the data on the front end, because we're going to use that to control the actual user interface. So the step 2 is the user interface. What it shows and how it shows things and what's available to you is based on the data that we have in that data layer. And this part right here, where we're building out the front end, is generally the longest part. And then finally, to top it all off, the third part is the actual backend, building the actual data setup and data functions on the server that will serve as our actual real data source. So let me break that down in terms of an actual feature I just recently completed on the Mockus, which is a feature that you're seeing on the screen right now to create and delete Mockuses as an admin in the app. So this is really very low-level fundamental stuff, but I'm following the same process when building it. The first thing I did was I built a data layer, which is basically where I took mock data that I would expect to be returned from a server if it was completed, and I put that into my code and just had my front-end data layer connect straight to that. So I didn't have to build the API first. And I find this to be a better way to do things, because I can iterate much quicker, and then if I change what the data looks like here, it's much easier to do that than it is once I've already built an API. So once I had that layer down, it was time to build the actual controls. Now for this particular feature, there were basically two components to the controls. On the left side of the screen, when you're on desktop, there's the list of Mockuses, which shows you which Mockus is current. It shows you obviously all of them, their dates, their names, and there's also a control to delete them. The current Mockus, by the way, is the one that would be loaded into the application at that given moment. And then on the right side, we have the create Mockus form, which is kind of a 2-step form where I put in a name, I put in a number of precincts, I hit create, and it opens up a list of precinct inputs, so I can type in their name and the number of delegates, and also start time and end time for the Mockus. And then when I hit create, it sends a request back to the back end, which I'll get to in a second. So basically, like I said, this was the most complicated part of building this feature. And generally speaking, it's the most complicated part of building any new feature for this application and really for most applications. When I'm working on something like this, I have to keep in mind, because I don't have a designer I'm working with, I'm doing that myself. I have to make sure that the work I'm doing is well designed, it fits, it makes sense in coordination with the rest of the features, that nothing looks out of place, that it looks clean and easy to use. And even though this is a feature that only administrators will ever see, I still want it to be relatively well designed and good looking so it's easy to use. You always want to put attention to detail at every level of the software, even if it's something that most users won't actually see. So moving on, the third part that I worked on for this new feature was the actual backend API and data setup. Now in this case, this API was really simple because it's literally just three things that I needed to do. I needed to be able to create a new Mockus, delete an existing Mockus, and fetch a list of all the Mockuses. In most applications, in most backend situations, you'll have this thing, or they call it a CRUD API, which stands for Create, Read, Update, Delete. And basically it's an API that gives you endpoints to manipulate the data in a lot of different ways. So obviously you can create and you can delete and you can fetch a list of the data that you're working with, just like mine, but you also have an option to update data, which I didn't need for what I was building. And you'd have an option to fetch a single instance, which again, I didn't need that for what I was doing either. I may end up implementing that one later, but it's a simple one, so it's not that big of a deal. That's really it. It's not terribly complicated, but it's one of those things that I don't think a lot of people know how it works. And you may never build software in your life, but it's kind of, I think it's interesting to know the process of making software. And like I said, if you're watching this and you're interested in a career in software development, this gives you some really good insight into what that might actually look like. So anyways, let's get to the workboard and I'll give you guys an update on what we're doing. All right, and here is the current state of the board for the Mockus app. As you can see, since the last update, we've closed 4 cards: the front-end Mockus data layer, the Mockus admin controls, the precinct data layer updates, and the Mockus API, the stuff I was talking about in the rest of the video, basically. We've also made significant progress on the candidate card. We finished a few more subtasks. There's a lot of functionality in this card, and Brandon is working on that. My next task is to work on the user management API. Basically, I have already created a user card on the front end that displays the user's information. So I'm taking that and then building a back end to manage the actual users in the application as an administrator. And then as far as what's left in the ready column, the big one is this precinct data API right here. This is going to plug into the candidate card work, and basically between those two things, that's the main functionality of the application. A lot of what's been completed so far is like low-level scaffolding functionality that makes everything else work. But these two cards right here, the candidate card and the precinct data API, are the main bread and butter of this application. And then aside from that, the precinct card V1 is just a quick way to view the current state of a precinct from the results overview page. And then the admin page user management controls, this is related to the user management API. And then other than that, we still have some smaller items in the backlog that I have not scoped out yet. None of these are terribly complicated except this last one, the global notifications. And yeah, that's where we're at. Making decent progress, looking open, aiming for an August release date for the Mockus at this point. We'll see how things go though. I know things did not go quite as planned so far in the month of June and early July, and there may or may not have been a community binge watching week involved in that calculation, and maybe some Call of Duty in there. I can neither confirm nor deny the veracity of those allegations, but there they are.
All right, guys, thank you for watching that video. If you have any comments about it, or you were confused about anything, or you want any clarification, please drop me a comment in the comments section. You know how it is. I'll respond to every single one of you, I promise. Let me know so I can tighten this up and work on this, because I want to create this kind of stuff in the future too. And before I let you go, I just want to ask you, check out the SpyFy After Dark podcast. It's on this YouTube channel as well as all the major podcasting platforms. This season has been the best season so far, and I think we've had some of the best episodes. Particularly the Star Wars episode from a couple weeks ago was really great, and we just did an episode on healthcare, and I'm literally recording an episode tomorrow that should be going up next week. So stay tuned, subscribe to this channel, you know how it is, you'll see the updates, and I'll see you next time.